eyes, man. You know, when you're in the car, we're gonna share.
Any questions?
Coffee this time of the day. Yeah, longer than it should be. All right. Well, I'm grateful to have this opportunity to really spend some time with folks who are helping to drive innovation here in the blue economy space. And so, you know, for me, you know, the value of today, and I'll try to drive at it in some of the questions I raise and some of the points that you make is, what can we do to continue to grow this industry, grow this sector, and you know, what might you inspire me to do on the legislative end? You know, last year I had put in a piece of legislation to focus on unlocking marine science funding. I think there's a lot of cross-pollination in the different aspects, whether it's the work that happens with undersea robotics or 3D molds, certainly the material science with composites, the integration of textiles. I know Jim and I spent some time there. To some of the things that we see obviously on the national security front with folks in town, but there's a lot of potential, and I think that we should be driving towards things where we can have a comparative advantage relative to other jurisdictions, but also things that unlock our real capacity to be bold. And according to URI, and this is a stat that I use often, we're expected to create in this industry over 50,000 jobs in the next decade, which is meaningful because we see challenges to the economy, some of which I want to hear from the folks that we have here today. But that's something we should drive towards, and I really believe in being very specific about that, and our leaders at every level, state, local, federal, can help play a role there. And of course, of late, and I'll probably start some of our conversation around this. We have experienced some headwinds, so to speak, with regard to activity coming out of Washington, right? The refusal and rejection of our commitment to science has been something that we've witnessed firsthand, whether it's been with research funding at our universities, the inability to maintain the staffing levels at critical agencies like NOAA, to the real challenge to so many possibilities regarding trade and the tariff climate that we've encountered. And so, I'm going to continue to stay focused here. You saw me really aggressively address the administration's attack on science at the National Weather Service, which I think is just sort of a no-brainer. Why would we mess with the apparatus that keeps us safe, especially being in Rhode Island during the height of Atlantic hurricane season? And they, because of those demands, we saw some retreat. Right? The administration heard our call and decided to try to hire 450 people back that had been laid off. We are continuing to support work around underwater capacities and drone underwater drone technology. Of course, connected to the threat in the Indo-Pacific, but also the dual use capacity. We spend so much time talking about that. That's the thing that excites me. I know we have, that national security part of it, but our ability to know what is the great unknown, which is our ocean. We only know a little bit about that. We can gain so much more knowledge on. So we're going to sort of keep this, informal. I have a series of questions, but if the spirit moves us, we might move in different directions that guides us to a place where I can take away some meaningful feedback, action as I work on some legislative ideas that we can maybe turn into real laws that make an impact and help us grow this sector of the economy. So with that, let's actually just get started by going around quite quickly. I know that folks in the room know each other, but it's important to just share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what the blue economy means to you. So Chase will start.
Sure. My name is Chase Hogenboom. I'm president of CET. We're a small business in Bristol, Rhode Island. Our area of focus or expertise is in designing and manufacturing underwater vehicles. Our legacy is in using composite materials, and so we leverage that knowledge to build pretty disruptive equipment.
I'm Jim Owens. I'm the founder and CEO of Nautilus Defense, and we build textile integrated microelectronic systems. So we are able to basically functionalize traditional textiles with electrical and electromagnetic capabilities to make them more capable. We build a lot of surface systems for various customers, and in the undersea domain, some of our material systems can be enabling of really interesting sensor capabilities that can get down to further depths with similar levels of mass and size.
Thanks for being here. Ian Estefanoin, CEO and co-founder of JAIA Robotics. We make micro-sized aquatic drones that, as representative said, was dual-use capabilities. We have some dual-use systems up here that aren't military. Tomorrow we'll be demonstrating the blue tide of military capabilities. So looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
My name is Ashley Medeiros, and I am with the Ocean Tech Hub, which is an initiative led by the Rhode Island Commerce Corporation. It is a regional initiative to support the growth of the ocean technology ecosystem here in Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts. And what I think I love is being able to hear and learn from everybody else and being able to figure out how we can support this ecosystem and the businesses and help them grow and scale and commercialize new technologies that are so needed.
Chris Goodwin, I represent Goodwin Bradley. We are a defense and aerospace manufacturing firm. We get into an array of different products, from shipbuilding to drone manufacturing and aerospace molds for a lot of commercial and defense jets as well. I'm also the chairman of Rhode Island Manufacturing Association, and thank you very much, Congressman. I truly believe that manufacturing is the heart and soul of Rhode Island, and Rhode Island has a lot of opportunity, especially in the defense market. I truly believe we are the tip of the spear when it comes to, we have two of the largest defense companies in Rhode Island, in the whole world, and they are extremely busy, and there's a lot of opportunity.
Thanks for having me, Sean Hawkins. I'm with Enginuity Partners. We are design engineers focused on product development in harsh environments and maritime, solving challenges in that space, working with startups to help bring ideas to life, prototypes, and then working with companies like the Navy to help with obsolescence, design for manufacturing, things like that.
Thank you. So I do want to start with some sort of scene setting. Tell me a little bit, and this is not although I'm a very partisan politician, I'm not a partisan query. I want to understand what the sort of last, 8 months of, changes, uncertainty has meant to you, and how has it affected and impacted your ability to plan, to hire, to buy equipment to grow. What is that meant to you? Because this is important to have this narrative so that we can try to fix it. But we'll start anywhere. Who wants to start?
I'm happy to start.
Yeah, please.
Enginuity, just briefly for some background, there's Enginuity Inc. In Halifax, Nova Scotia, and they've been around for a little over 20 years, and we saw a ton of opportunity in Rhode Island through blue tech, as well as we're doing like medical device, life sciences, and stuff like that. So came here for that reason, because we saw so much opportunity. And then with the new administration in the last 8 months, we've seen a lot of that opportunity either pause or just or stall or go away based on whether it's NIH funding being cut, funding with the Navy, Department of Defense. It's stalled everything. That just trickles down to us being able to support those customers and grow our business.
We were very fortunate in that we kicked off an equity raise in November last year, and we closed that raise with a $3 million raise completed in March. If we try to do that post-January, I think it would be extremely difficult. What it did do was place us in a situation where we had a very strong cash balance, but we had a hiring plan. We had a product development plan. We've had to really rein that in. So we've not hired the people we wanted to hire, because looking at the uncertainty that was introduced because of what's happened in the administration, so much so that we are unable right now to put down a forecast that we can look ahead and say, what is this going to look like over the next 12 to 18 months? Because we just don't know. An example of tariffs, we use little actuators in our robots, and they move the rudder. We place a $1,700 order with a company in Canada for this. The bill came in, it had $2,300 of tariffs on top of the $1,700 order, which was like, we didn't plan that. So it's really impacted us both fiscally and in our kind of growth plans as well. Now we're managing it prudently and I think wisely, but it's definitely had a significant impact.
One of the biggest impacts that I've encountered, so for the last 8 months, we've seen a big uptick in defense. There's a huge void there that needs to be filled, and we're trying our best to take as much of that work on as possible. The biggest threat that I've seen in growing is the tariffs on new equipment. If you're going to buy a machine for X amount of dollars, and if it's not already in the States, and then the tariff, has kicked in, which it has now, I believe, we're looking at I believe, a 25% increase in price, and that machine was $1 million. So that's, that is a big chunk of change to not have budgeted, because a month ago that wasn't an issue. That was one of the things that I saw as being, one of the biggest hurdles to overcome from a growth standpoint.
Yeah, I'd like to echo just what Chris said. We're fortunate enough to work with the Department of Defense and develop some capabilities here in Rhode Island, and some of that involved buying some equipment. It's rather expensive, and it was from a European country, and similar dollar amounts that Chris is talking about, and the tariffs, on any given week go from $200,000 to $500,000 to $150,000. Huge swings, and because it's rather confusing.
I can scare you when you're going to sign on the dotted line.
Exactly.
Yeah, and look, the fact of the matter is, especially when you think about the defense space, where I believe we can get a lot of waste out of the system, why would we pass that down to folks who are supplying the technologies to make us leaner, to make us more efficient using the technology that we put forward using these systems? So, it's you can't hear on one end that there's a pursuit of eradicating wasteful fraud and abuse, and then you're creating all of this pressure, cost pressure on folks who are really just trying to get a job done. And so I do think, especially when government is in the mix, that it makes the tariff context even more problematic. But what I've heard across sectors, this is the second conversation I've had with manufacturers, is uncertainty yields real difficulty, and you really can't see down the road, and that just makes it more difficult for you to be the job creators that you're supposed to be as well. And then that's a transition to my next point, which is around the attacks on science funding and science and scientific knowledge held by the people who are going to carry out this important work. And Ashley, I actually want to turn to you. I know some of the work that you do is around university partnerships and with higher ed. I've talked to people who are involved in admissions work, who are in pipeline programs, who say effectively that there are going to be fewer young people chasing these roles that might be, whether they're a terminal degree or a PhD, something in the interim, or whatever it is, and that shrinks the pipeline of people who will eventually be able to be in these high skilled, high wage opportunities. What are you hearing from your sort of university, higher ed, partnerships around any impacts?
I think as a whole, both from the tariff perspective within industry and within universities, it's going to stifle innovation because we're not going to have the capacity to build new emerging products that are going to take the United States to the next level and be able to compete internationally. And so that's one of the concerns that we see, and new technologies in this space, there's still a lot to grow, and I know everybody here on this table is doing those things, and as you said, if you can't purchase a new piece of equipment to maybe build that new emerging product, then that's stifling innovation. And universities are feeling it because they're not able to do the research to help us develop new ideas and capacity. And so I think that's one of the biggest concerns within research. I did hear from universities who said, grants were pulled, and that means it stops. When you're doing research, you can't just pick up in 9-10 months and start from where you start. You can't turn off that machine and just say, okay, we're going to flip a switch. You have to start from scratch. And some of these things were pulled because of language that was pulled out and words that this administration doesn't approve of. And so while these grants actually were not supporting this, whatever they thought it was.
Some level of DEI or something like
yes,
that. Something not
and
turning
one
into the work.
specifically I'm hearing it was under a resilience terminology. It was looking at submarines and safety of warfighters. Well, that was 10 months in of a 12, 14 month grant that then stopped. Now they're appealing it, but unfortunately now as taxpayers we're wasting more money because they're going to have to give more money to start from the beginning because it's something that's important.
Yeah. And has anyone had any specific research-oriented funding, pull that affects any of your work?
We've had a lot of disruptions this year. We're very fortunate that everything is back online now. Mm-hmm. But as a small company that's bootstrapped, we had to do a lot to mitigate the risk of those not coming back online, or potentially some of our customers just going away. Yeah. Right, which is a sort of a fairly unprecedented thing when you're working with federal customers. So there's certainly some significant costs to the momentum we were building. Some of our advanced research projects, and we weren't even caught up in any of the DEI type of scrutiny. It was really just that we do a lot of advanced research. We have a strong focus on building real things that have utility and transitioning them to our partners early in programs and often, so that we can get feedback and adapt our research methods. But just because we're also looking at things that will have an impact over a longer timeline, we're kind of caught in the the larger royal of what's happening and saying, well, if this doesn't help us today, we don't want to make those kinds of investments. So we've been fortunate again to, with some support from our delegation, to be able to advocate for those programs and see them turn back on. But really not something that the scientific industrial community and the scientific manufacturing community could survive too many cycles of. So hopefully that's what it is.
Anybody else with research funding in particular?
It was a customer, potential customer with an NIH grant that we helped them write the technical side of that grant. That was earlier in this year. That was put on hold based on the funding stopping. So that's kind of twofold, where we were able, that stops a small company like ours being able to grow in the state, which is what we came here to do. And then it stops a very important medical technology to get out into the public. So.
And Chase, I know, for example, you work with Woods Hole and to validate your models. Has there, well, let's put it another way. If that partnership did not exist in the same way, how do you feel your ability to test your work would go? Would you be able to do that in a reasonable way if Woods Hole did not continue to receive the support that it does?
Well, from a bigger picture, Woods Hole is really a national treasure.
Completely.
And one of the reasons why we're here today and being able to have this open conversation is because of some of the things that Woods Hole has done. Mm-hmm. And they're not unique. There's lots of other institutions that do science but have played critical roles in making this country what it is. And the fact of the matter is, didn't happen by chance or luck. It was all part of the plan. And so the idea of changing that plan, deviating from it, without another plan is a little bit short-sighted, it seems. With respect to what the work that we do with Woods Hole, it's bridging the gap between theoretical and real. Yeah. And they have some very unique facilities that are not readily available globally, but they happen to have some, and so being able to validate the theoretical work that we do so that we can expedite things to get it out to the field faster is very important.
No, and the importance of our unique geographical capacities is important. Is why I'm fixated on what we can do to deploy our unique ability here. Sean, I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned, so that everybody knows, Enginuity is Canadian. We love Canada. Why? Give me a sense of why Rhode Island?
Yeah.
For you guys?
So there's a number of reasons. One was they were coming here for the Blue Innovation Symposium that Toby was putting on, and then 401 Tech Bridge, Northeast Tech Bridge, really not making the blue economy not so fragmented and actually like a real economy or ecosystem. So that was one that really attracted us based on the work that we're already doing in Halifax in that space. Then there was the Navy being here and so relevant, and our background of doing that in Canada or in the UK, whatnot. The talent within the universities is really strong in the engineering space. Definitely want to see that keep happening, as you just mentioned. That's a challenge. And there's just history in general that just made a lot of sense. But that's been a really big challenge as of late. People are, with the tariffs and the rhetoric around trade wars and border stuff, it's become a big personal attack on 40 million people up north that a year ago was not the case. And so they're switching supply chains. They're not putting, U.S. alcohol on the shelves. So it's really caused a big rift.
All those Labatt Blue drinkers are really
Yeah.
but in all seriousness, I mean, look, the cultural ties, the fact is we are in a globally, interdependent, sort of mutually beneficial marketplace. Yes, there are things that we can do, and certainly I have lots of positions on how to stem the loss of jobs here. But as you grow and innovate, being able to have those relationships, have resulted in us being better off, and that's a fact. I do want to talk about one of my favorite topics, and not just because they're here in the room and they do so much work with us, but manufacturing extension partnerships, Polaris, and that's a fight we may have to have. It isn't a given that we will continue to have the type of support to grow, these jobs where people make things good. Can you all share a little bit about your experience with Polaris? And you don't have to be nice because they're in the room. you can be honest. Yes, Chris, go for it.
So my experience with Polaris, the reason why a fourth generation 115-year-old company is here today is because of Polaris. Without their technical experience, the advice that they bring on a monthly basis, and the grant programs, they are monumentally important to growing a business, sustaining a business, bringing on certifications such as like ISO, AS9100, lean manufacturing. These are all things that people of today, if they're not implementing in their business, they're not going to be here tomorrow. At years, especially years of when we were going through COVID, things of that nature, we were probably 80% commercial aerospace at that time. It was the wrong business to be in. If it wasn't for Polaris helping us with different trainings, helping us diversify into the defense market, again, we would not have survived that. So making sure that their programs are funded, are growing, because they are boots on the ground. They are, what I consider the backbone of making sure that Rhode Island stays healthy as far as manufacturing. The grants that they work with us on, anything from certifications to new software to training, new computers. I mean, it's I can't say enough about it.
And it results in JOBs, right?
Yes.
Right, and that's what I'm driving towards. Anybody else?
So, who are Polaris? No. I have to say that they did a program with us where they brought a bunch of folks in and really dug into the company with a bunch of students from URI and professors from URI, along with their technical expertise. And it was 3 days of hell, right? Because they dug in so deep and asked so many great questions that it really made us look internally as to what we were doing. And they put together an action plan that said, okay, these are the gaps you see. This is what you should focus on. Now we can choose to accept it or not. And we did a bit of both, right? But it was fantastic. What it provided us was, first, today's world is incredibly vulnerable to cyber attack.
Yes.
And if you don't have the infrastructure in place, you could be in serious trouble with ransomware and all sorts of things. So they provided the funding to get us down to the path where we are now ready to get CMMC Level 2 certified. That, for a small business, is incredibly valuable. Superb. It allowed us to build a cloud infrastructure so that we can operate a giant bot system from anywhere to anywhere in the world, which is amazing. It allowed us to build the manufacturing capability that we have in-house. So a bunch of equipment was bought. We would not have the people that we have in the company today without that investment. because it allowed us to deliver product when we said we could deliver it. It also allowed us to look at scaling externally. So we asked them, could you help identify what manufacturing companies would be a good fit for JAIA to scale our production? And they introduced us to VR Industries, and we've worked with them for the last 2 years to do a tech transfer, and they're ready to take JAIA Bot to scale, making hundreds of bots a month. It's going to take a ramp of 6 or 7 months to get there, but without that help, without that expertise, again, for a small business like us, it was invaluable. So I don't know what we would do without it. So thank you.
With the CMMC, it's not just here in this region, but we're specifically impacted because of the DoD contracts here. And so CMMC is the cybersecurity, the new certification that you need to be able to go out, and it is incredibly expensive. It is incredibly time consuming, and if you don't have that expertise, it is nearly impossible to get certified. And so that means if we don't have somebody to support this, our companies aren't going to be able to continue to be suppliers or contractors for DoD. And so that's something that I really wanted to point out, because we're hearing it from multiple companies across the state.
Yeah, this is definitely, there's a lot of companies that aren't pursuing the CMMC, and they are going to see a huge constraint on the supply chain. The supply chain is going to get choked dramatically when this goes into effect, and I believe it goes into effect October 1st of 2026.
But luckily, we're ahead. Got that work in progress.
Yeah, I mean, luckily there's a few manufacturers taking it seriously and investing the money that they need, working with Polaris and other firms to make it happen, but there are a lot of people that it's going to cause a big problem.
Anyone? And you know, complementary to that, of course, is the work of 401 Tech Bridge, which, you know, of course, again, these force multiplying organizations that receive the resources to, you know, go out. I mean, but again, this is an ecosystem, right? Like all of these links, I think are especially valuable, and then, you know, as we think about, okay, what as a sort of connected ecosystem are we trying to produce, and how can some of these operations feed off of one another once, you know, they've been sort of propelled and launched into a series of successes. You know, the last thing I wanted to ask as we go around the table is, and I hope someone told you this was coming. I don't come without asking for things. This is in politics. I was asking for stuff. What is one thing tangibly that you think we can do, whether in policy, legislation, moving people, resources, etc., into an area? Give me something to take away, you know, back as part of this work to help grow Blue Economy. We can start anywhere.
I got two things. Start with kind of going back to the last question about Polaris and 401 Tech Bridge, but continuing to support organizations that provide sort of connective tissue within the state is critical. We're all resource constrained, and often that comes down to picking where we're going to be an expert and where we're going to be a novice as an organization. So having access to labs at URI for testing, folks at Polaris who understand supply chain and you know, manufacturing problems that maybe we haven't addressed before as a small company, absolutely critical to growth. So I would say that those are, you know, the return on investment there is pretty absurd, particularly in a small state where they can touch everybody as just by being here and being present and taking a 45-minute drive north or south, right? So there's that, and then an area that I think we all have to approach this carefully as we grow is how we invest in our own infrastructure, whether that's facilities or equipment, or things like cyber and IT, right? Those all matter, and more AI will be a component of this and how it permeates all of our companies. But those are investments that traditionally there isn't a lot of funding that's the right color to support them, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that, historical and otherwise. But the more that we can make that type of funding as accessible to bid on as basic research, which is critically important as well, of course. But there's a gap there where kind of oftentimes once something is considered to be low risk technically, there isn't nearly as much support for it, getting it through the valley of death, right? To a place where it can reliably be transitioned, maintained, supported at a reasonable cost, and in a way where you can be certain that it's available. We're all constrained by also our supply chains, right? So those types of investments are sometimes less sexy, right? They're harder to advocate for, but they're as important as anything else we're doing if we want to really have an impact that is sustainable.
That's helpful. Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree with Jim in that, a lot of the new requirements that are getting pushed down to folks trying to support the defense business are universal. It doesn't matter the size of your business. And so, just the fact is that smaller businesses have a hard time meeting some of these requirements than some of the largest businesses in the world do. And so having funding things like Polaris that can help bridge that gap and give resources to small businesses that need to meet the requirements to continue to stay in business can continue to do so. And then secondly, really the most important thing I think is predictability and consistency. And if policies change and folks want to do things a different way, there's a system in place to do that. And
Reasonable time to sunset,
it involves getting a consensus and vote. But when something's been voted on and approved, and then changing path, is just a very challenging thing. And so change is fine, but just to have it be done and the process that's been set up.
I mean, I echo exactly what both of those gentlemen just said. Is the funding for these programs. A lot of us know what needs to be done, but we need financial help to do it. And if there's anything that you could do to, have some kind of caveat where if a company is looking to grow and bring in equipment made by a foreign entity, that there's something there where the tariff is either eliminated altogether, wonderful, or reduced. If there's anything we could do with that, I definitely think it would help companies. It'd be one more roadblock. I apologize, I have to leave.
I know you gotta run, so.
But thank you very much for making this a topic, and good luck. Thank you.
I've got a shopping list.
Hit me.
Right. So one of the things that we have benefited from but struggled with, this summer we had 11 interns at the company. They all had specific projects. It was a fantastic energy kind of boost to our team to have people who go and do real value add work. The talent pipeline that is needed if we're going to grow blue tech in this economy is critical. So making sure that we have the schools, both vocational and academic, to deliver that pipeline is critical. So how do we do that? I don't have all the answers, but it's super important. From a startup perspective, Rhode Island is a fairly infertile place for startup, for investment organizations. You have Cherrystone, you have Rogue, and that's pretty much it. You look into the Massachusetts area, it's much, much bigger. So how do we create tax incentives, tax breaks, like what is going to motivate people to move to the Rhode Island area to invest in blue tech? That would be a really big leg up for certainly the early stage startups. And if we can somehow, right, what the current administration is doing is we're not all amazed in a good way about it. But removing bureaucracy and having contracting models that make it easier for small businesses to apply for government programs, to apply for DoD business, apply for grants would be amazing, because it's so complex sometimes to navigate that contracting space, to understand how do we get the proposal in, meet all the FARs, the DFARs. For a company with 12 people, right, that's a real challenge. So there's OTAs, it's moving. But if we can accelerate that and really open up the door for small businesses like JAIA, like Jim, like Chase, right, like Sean's company, to get into that door so it's not dominated by the primes, that would be a huge win.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That was my point, and that's not only a huge win for us, but it's a huge win for the country, because then they're having people do the work that they need them to be doing.
Anything from a macro standpoint? Ashley?
Yeah, I would say, the Ocean Tech Hub is one of the tech hubs that, we would love to see some investment in this region, specifically to address these areas that we've talked about today, and I've talked to a lot of companies and included, the need for testing solutions. I would say like ocean technology is hard tech. It is the hardest hard tech that we could probably have to develop. I mean, the conditions and the ability to test and to experiment and labs and things just makes it so much more difficult to have to go out on a vessel, and the cost of renting that vessel, or having to go somewhere else to test your technology because we don't have the infrastructure and resources. And so as we look at what the Ocean Tech Hub can do, that's what we've really come to, is how do we create an infrastructure, and I'm going to use Nova Scotia because I'm obsessed with the Cove in Nova Scotia and what they have built there for that startup ecosystem, and the amount of companies that are at the Cove and the waiting list they have just to get into that facility. To be able to invest in something like that here would I think really be a huge asset to this region in Rhode Island.
And look, it's strategically important. It's one of the reasons, I'll tell you a few things that I've worked on, in closing. Certainly, the Blue Economy legislation that I had to invest in marine science is just one element. Another piece of legislation that we helped get across the finish line that we have to actually get funded now is the Southern New England Regional Commission, akin to regional commissions that exist in other parts of the country, Appalachia, the Delta region, to really come together on a set of capacity building exercises and investments in very geographically distinct work. And I think this should be a focus area of it. We are in the process of trying to get funding for it from the appropriation side, which would then allow us to have staff and to start to build out that both thought leadership and then hopefully the convening power to secure additional resources. It's why I've focused on the speediness around AUKUS, right? The security arrangement between Australia, the US, and the UK. We know that the Indo-Pacific is going to be a big focus of ours. I'm coming at it from the diplomatic standpoint. I want to prevent war, and I think a deterrent presence can do that. And so investing in the types of technology that allow our adversary in China to say, well, maybe we can't, meet our goals of conquest, and that slows them down. That is very meaningful. So, but we need to move quickly, because we know what they're able to do from the production standpoint on shipbuilding. We have to get faster there. And then it's why I've been very focused on growing technological and science capacity. When I've spoken with leaders, it's always comes back to talent. And so we've got the location thing sorted. You got to get the capital thing sorted, but the talent, you can't just come up with out of the sky. And the AI robots aren't going to do all this work. And so we will have to get there. But on the AI front, it's why I last Congress, and I will introduce what I'm hoping to introduce some version of it, had a bill around AI literacy starting early, making sure that our young people have an ability to not just know how to talk into the phones and ask Siri to use ChatGPT, but that we are able to build some elevated knowledge around our artificial intelligence at every segment, so that secondary ed and higher ed can start to integrate more thoughtfully and intentionally going forward. So that one is a little bit more tangential to this conversation, but it all flows into the same direction as us being ready to grow. And that is where we'll end. I know we will get there. I'm quite optimistic. That's why I've spent so much time in my last 22 months thinking and talking about this with so many in this room. And I invite you, encourage you, and urge you to stay in touch with me on this. Where I have opportunities, I will be in touch with you, and where you see something in the gray and said, well, maybe there's a congressman who cares about this stuff, that's probably me. So thank you for participating, and I look forward to continuing to work with you to make sure that the blue economy thrives as it should right here in Rhode Island. Thank you.
Thank you.